Finally, we have a little bit of sun out, and today I've brought you to that wonderful Glebe Fisheries here down in Leicestershire. And I brought you on a brilliant peg, peg 86 on Lake 6, probably the most famous peg here at the Glebe, I would say, to show you a bit about margin fishing for carp in the spring. Now, all winter, not really caught many carp, not really fed in areas of the peg that you'd expect them to, i.e. the margins. So today I'm going to run you through exactly how I go about it as the fish start to wake up. We're still not in full summer mode, but we're going to have a great day hopefully, catch some carp, and now is the time when they're going to start feeding, and fishing only gets better from here. So like I say, first day of a bit of sun, really looking forward to it. Let's get into it and I'll show you exactly where I'm going to fish and what bait I'm going to be using. To get the most out of your day, the first thing you want to try and consider is where to actually fish. Location. So today we've got a beautiful warm wind blowing in. The wind is actually warmer than the water temperature now, so the fish are going to want to follow that. Wherever there's a nice warmer wind blowing, that's where the fish are going to go, especially carp. They love being warm. The second thing to consider is whereabouts in my peg I choose to fish. In the past, I would have fished slightly, I'm only talking 2 or 3 weeks ago here, I would have fished slightly further down the slope because the water wouldn't have been as coloured. So that's one thing to consider. Now the water's starting to colour up week on week, with the wind turning the water over, a little bit of rain, a little bit of mud coming off the bank, fish movement, all of a sudden all these factors start to make the fish go into slightly shallower water and feel a bit more confident. So I'm going to fish a little bit further up the slope today. I'm going to plumb that up and show you exactly where I'm going to choose to fish, but also sun on the peg, warm wind, wideish part of the lake, so the fish, they're not going to be in full summer mode, they're not going to be up out of the wind. Why would they be up out of the wind when basically it's warmer down this end? The fish are going to want to be where it's warm, exactly where you'd want to be. If you feel comfortable sat in the conditions, the fish are probably going to be the same. So let's chuck a plummet on and I'll show you exactly why I'm choosing to fish where I'm going to fish today. So you can see there I'm fishing almost against the bank now. It's 2.5 foot deep there. A few weeks ago I probably would have been fishing a good 1.5 meters off the bank, looking for sort of 3 foot. That there is about, I would say, 4 inch deeper. It's dropping down slightly. That's where I may have fished 2 or 3 weeks ago. The fish would be not as happy going into that shallow water, but now all of a sudden they're going to be happy feeding against that bank. Now, one thing that's really important is making sure that the bank's clean. We've got a perfect peg for it here. There's no sort of trees overhanging. We've got some reeds and some brambles, but there's no like leaves and stuff like that. And what you're going to find there is that the bottom's going to be nice and hard, nice and clean. The further you come away, the more you're going into the silt. And carp love fish feeding on a nice, clean, hard bottom. So when I choose to fish here, you can see I've got 2.5 foot of water against the bank, which I think is a perfect depth. If it was about 18 inches, all of a sudden, because the water's not fully chocolate coloured up, the fish are going to be a little bit wary. They're going to feed very slowly in your peg. They start to become hard to catch. 2.5 foot, you can't quite see the fish. You might see an odd bit of mud come up where they're ripping the bottom up if they start feeding aggressively, but generally it's a nice safe depth. 2.5 foot for bigger fish like carp in sort of the 5 pound bracket, I think it's a great starting point. If we was getting really lots and lots of liners and stuff like that, then we could maybe try and find a shallower part of my peg. So for instance, the right hand margin is about 18 inches deep. I feel like that's a little bit too shallow today, but in the height of summer, that right hand margin would probably be better than me fishing up the bank because it's a little bit shallower. Going into the winter though, obviously we'd have been fishing way off this bank, trying to fish where the fish feel comfortable. So today, I feel like this is probably an area that a lot of people haven't caught loads of fish here throughout the winter, maybe an odd bite, but now this is going to be a great feeding area for the carp. So plumbing up wise, you want about 1 inch of line on the bottom, because you'll see here, as I come away from the bank, if I get to about there, all of a sudden it starts to drop off. So I need to be within 6 inches of the bank, and I've got this nice little slope to lay my rig against. So I'm basically going to pick my rig up, pull it into the shelf, let it fall onto that slope. If I go really tight up, I'm going to be about 1.5 inches, 2 inch over depth. If I come off like 4 inch, I'm going to be 1 inch over depth. 6 inch, I'm going to be just touching the bottom. So what that means is my bait is going to be lying on the bottom. It's not going directly downwards. If it goes directly down, sometimes the carp will touch it and they'll spook. Whereas if I've got 2 inches of line on the bottom and it's lay against the bank almost in the curve, hopefully the fish won't feel that line before they get to my hook bait and I won't spook as many. So that's the reason I've got a little bit of line on the bottom. I'm always going to drag my rig from left to right into the bank. And then the other little thing that I've got is a couple of back shots on the rig. So I'll run you quickly through the rig itself. We're going to be catching some decent fish today, so we want to try and beef our gear up ready for catching them fish. We don't want to be fishing too light, we want durable stuff. So we've got a black Guru elastic here, which is about 16's rating, something along them lines. We've got proper line on, 022 mainline, 2 number 8 cube as a back shot. That's really important because that holds the float against the bank and it stops it drifting off. If my back shots were up here, I could drift potentially 8 inches away from the bank. So by having them about 4 inches away from my float, that pins that float against that shelf. And then I've got a real big bristle on this, 2mm bristle, because again, we're going to be fishing big baits. We're fishing with ground bait and corn today, my favourite 2 carp baits for catching carp in the spring. 2mm bristle so that it's buoyant. I'm not going to be striking at too many daft liners, but also it's big enough to suspend that bait because we could put single or even double corn if the fishing's good. The float itself is 0.4 of a gram, so I've got a nice solid bulk. I don't want a little faffy strung out rig or anything like that. I just want a nice block of shot that's going to pin this rig in position. So it's a JL float, it's got a fiberglass stem, and that's for durability. Don't want it breaking. Again, we're catching big fish, we don't want to mess about. And then coming down, I've just got a simple bulk of 6 number 8 cubes, a 4-inch hook length. If I feel like the fish are spooking a little bit, what I can do with this, I can move this bulk up to about 6 inches away. So if I feel like my bulk's too close to the bottom, then I can move this bulk slightly further away, but I'm not going to mess about with like tapered shotting patterns or strung bulks or anything like that. It's just going to be a solid block of shot that's going to hold that rig in position. Once I've fed, I want to get my rig in position, sit and wait for that bite. And then to finish that off, I've got 017. I could step it up if we get broke, but we should be fine with this. And the hook itself is a 14's SLWG, which, like I say, I'm going to put a single or double corn on. So the rig's quite durable. We've got elastic to suit. You know, hopefully we'll catch some decent stamp fish today, fishing in that 2.5 foot of water. And that's the reason why I've chose to fish there. The bottom's a little bit cleaner. I feel like it's a real nice depth. The fish can't get too far behind my rig and cause lots of liners and foul hookers. And it's probably a spot where we've not caught a lot of fish in the past 6 months, but all of a sudden now, the sun comes up, the carp warm up and they want to feed. And these are the sort of areas you peg that you need to target. Bait choice, really simple. 2 of my favourite baits when it comes for carp, ground bait to attract them, and then hook bait wise, sweet corn. It's brilliant for big carp. If there was F1s involved, then I love maggots and I love baits like meat where allowed, not here at the Glebe, but certain venues you're allowed meat because they're a little bit softer. But for carp, the reason I love corn, it's a little bit heavier. I can pick out all different size bits. So this is just the Freshona corn, I think it's called, from B&M. Dead simple. You know, if I want a real nice big bit, I can pick that out. If I want a slightly smaller bit, you know, dig through, you can pick a slightly smaller bit out. Most of the time though, I'm looking for the great big fat kernels like that, and that'd be my hook bait. So corn, brilliant because it's got weight to it, keeps it in position. Can't push your bait about a little bit more. Maggots can also be brilliant, dead maggots. The way I'm going to feed it today, I'm not adding lots of particles. It's still quite cold, so I want to attract the fish, but I don't really want to fill them up. In the summer, I'm a massive fan of putting like 50-50 micros and ground bait, so I've got some food content in there. I'm a massive fan of adding dead maggots to my ground bait, and again, it's got a bit more food content in. This time of year, I tend to just rely on the ground bait itself and don't add that many particles. The brilliant thing about corn, because it's quite, the water's still a little bit clearer, it's got a tinge of colour to it, it's got a nice colour to it. If I put 10 or 15 grains in, it's a great visual, but without filling them up. And again, corn, it's not a very filling bait, it's just skin and juice most of the time, so it's not going to fill them up like hard pellets or baits like that. Now, ground bait choice, a new ground bait, green bagger mix. I've used the bagger all last season, it was brilliant. I'm a big fan of green though. I like to have that tinge of green because when I'm fishing with dead reds, and I spoke about it in my last video, if you go back and watch the last video we did on the Mainline Match YouTube page, you'll see I spoke about when I'm fishing with pellets, I like that natural colour, and you'll catch over anything. but I always feel green and yellow or green and red is a brilliant combination. Now, you can fish, the way I'm fishing today, feeding ground bait, I can put any up bait I want over the top of it and I will catch fish, but there's always one that's better than others. So that could be dead maggots, it could be worm, it could be meat where allowed. But for me, I always seem to go back to corn. It's just a brilliant hook bait. So in terms of mixing the ground bait, again, I've spoke about this in the past. A kilo of ground bait is around about 3 pints. So I want to mix with that half the quantity of water. So I've got 1.5 pints of water here, which we're going to go straight in with. Get that in, get your ground bait mixed round. And I always say it goes a little bit sloppy and a little bit wet. You want that because you want the particles to absorb the water. You want to try and make your ground bait a little bit heavier, not too heavy, and you don't want it too dry, but you just want to get it to that nice consistency. So what will happen here is when it goes to that sort of sticky texture, it'll dry out a little bit. Give it time to absorb the water. I'm just going to give that a quick run. Give it time to absorb the water. I'm going to give that probably 10 minutes, let the water fully absorb into it, pass it through a riddle, and then I'll tinker it from there. I might literally only need to get an handful of water just to tinker it, or I might need 2 handfuls, you know, I'll just mix it and I think, yeah, that's nice. Now, a great sign to know when your ground bait's right, even though it's not ready to riddle, the best sign is when you've got to sort of almost push it through that riddle. And when it gets to that stage where it's like, it's going through the riddle, but it's like quite hard to go through the riddle, you know you can't get any more water in. So like then all of a sudden, that's when you know your ground bait's got enough water in. And I always think that's perfect now. If you're mixing it and it's rolling like a little sausages and stuff like that, you've probably overwetted it. So always start 2 parts ground bait, 2 parts ground bait to half water. Well, half water. I'll start again. 2 parts ground bait, 1 part water. So whatever you're using ground bait, half the water. And that is always a good starting point. You're not going to ruin your ground bait like that, and then you can tinker it to suit. If the fish are not coming in, you might want it on that slightly drier side. So don't dampen all your ground bait straight away. It's going to dry out. When the sun's out in the summer, it's going to dry out throughout the day. So you literally only need a bit just to rehydrate your ground bait. And that could be just a case of dipping your hand in the water, tiny little mixture, it just dampens it back off. It just feeds so much nicer when you're trying to put it in your pot as well. So that's it, ground bait and corn. Like I say, it's not fully ready yet, but it's going to be something like that when it's done. That's actually perfect now, but the water hasn't had time to absorb, so I'm going to give it another 10 minutes, then I'll pass it through the riddle. And like I say, you start off with that claggy mixture, but the water's doing its magic. And what that's going to do, it's going to expand them pellets. It's going to make them pellets a little bit heavier, slightly bigger. They're going to expand in your thing, and then all of a sudden it's going to be perfect for feeding. So we'll get that put through the riddle. But ground bait wise, green bagger, it's going to be an absolute brilliant ground bait this year. So brilliant addition to the range. And then obviously corn for hook bait, but you could literally use anything for hook bait. But for me, carp, when there's no F1s in here, we're not catching anything other than carp. So corn's going to be my go-to bait. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is timing and feeding. 2 really important factors when it comes to doing this style of fishing. If I was fishing in a match situation or even a pleasure situation, the carp are going to feed later in the afternoon towards the end of the day. The reason for this is it takes a bit of time for the water to warm through, and the fish are not going to feed probably until after dinner. Now if there's a match situation, you've got a 5-hour window. I probably wouldn't feed any bait in that spot until the last half of the match. So 2.5 hours to go, then I'd be looking to actually feed the peg. So you can see here, I've mixed that ground bait up, got a kilo of ground bait, 3 pints of ground bait, all the water is now absorbed, the pellets have expanded, the ground bait's expanded. We've got about 5.5 pints of ground bait now. It's 5.5 pint Guru tub, and you can see there, level with the top, so it nearly doubled in size. That's going to be enough for today's session. We're only going to be fishing, like I say, we're not going to be feeding massive amounts every single chuck, so we're not going to be going in big potting every single fish. But in the summer months, that might be required. The fish are hungrier when the water's warmer and the fishing's a lot better. But at this time of year, we're not going to feed like that. We're probably going to try to get the fish there and then try to kinder pot just to try and get a bite, start again, and prolong the peg. We don't want to fill them up, but we want to attract them. So kick-starting my session off, there's a few different things I would do. In the summer, I would probably go in and maybe put 3 or 4 of these in. This time of the year, I'm probably only going to put 2 of these in. So I've got a 200 ml pot there, level with the surface. 400 ml ground bait I think is a good starting point, and then I'd probably look to leave that for sort of like 20-30 minutes before I either fed it again or wet and had my first look. So again, think about how long you think your peg's going to last. You're not going to catch there all day. If you did, you'd probably have 300 pound, which that can happen in the summer months, but this time of year, realistically, 100, a low 100 pound is a mega day's fishing. I'm only probably looking to catch 50 or 60 pound there the last couple of hours. So realistically, 10 or 12 fish, one every 5 or 6 minutes, that would be a real good spell of margin fishing. So kickstart the peg, I'm going to put 2 pots of this in. The first pot will just be ground bait. I'll just give it a gentle push and that'll sandcastle out. The next pot, I might add a few grains of corn to it. So what I might do with the next pot is not put loads, just like 20 grains of corn. And like I say, with this green colour, it really stands out against it. So then I might put 20 grains of corn in, go and feed another 200 ml of that. And that is how I'd sort of kickstart my session. Now, once we've been fishing for a while, then what I've got to try and work out is how much bait the fish want. Once they're there and they're grubbing around the area, you're going to ruin your peg if you start going in and constantly keep big potting it. So then I'll try and work out how much I need to feed to get a bite. Now, I've got 3 pots here that I'd probably use for my summer carp fishing. The medium one is more for like canalised lakes. So the medium fast release there, it's more canalised lakes, smaller carp. I don't feel like that's going to be enough ground bait today, so we're not going to use that one. The 2 that are my favourites is the large and the new XL. The XL holds about 50 ml ground bait. It's a real good carp pot. The large, I would use that probably if I've got a lot of fish in my peg and I feel like I don't need to keep putting extra bait in. That's just enough to get a bite. So once I've fed that peg and I've put 400 ml ground bait there, I've primed it up, I've give it time to settle, I've give it time for the fish to find the bait, 20-30 minutes. Maybe they won't come onto it that quick. Maybe I need to give it another pot, carry on doing what I'm doing in the rest of my match. And then when I know they're there, I can go in and start getting some bites. Then I might be able to kinder pot over the top. Now, that might not last very long. You might kinder pot, catch 2 or 3 fish, you feel like they've gone. The only way you're ever going to track fish back into your peg is by feeding. So I might pick another 200 ml pot up, go back in, feed it with a big pot, try and gather some fish back in, go back in, kinder pot over the top and do it that way. So start the session, I'm going to put 2 pots of this in, so 400 ml ground bait in total, right on my spot. Give it sort of 20-30 minutes, let the fish sort of come over it, try and settle. The more you're fishing for, the earlier you need to feed it. The less you're fishing for, generally, the later you need to feed it. And what I mean by that is, if you know you go to a venue and if you catch 4 or 5 margin fish, that's good. Compared to 20 margin fish, you've got to give yourself time to catch that amount of fish. So for me to catch 4 or 5 margin fish, sometimes I might only feed my margin with an hour and a half to go and fish it the last 45 minutes. That's plenty enough time to catch 4 or 5 fish. What I don't want to do is keep putting bait there all day, an odd fish comes and has a look, and by the time they've had a fill and they're full up, all of a sudden they don't want to feed that last hour and a half because you've started your peg too quickly. Margin fishing, I always feel like the carp, come and have a look. You might last an hour if the fishing's good, 2 hours would be unbelievable for margin fishing. You're not going to catch there for a full 5 hours unless you go to venues that are ridiculously solid and you're fishing for really, really big weights. So on here, I feel like an hour and a half margin fishing at the end would be fantastic. That would really bump your weight up with the size of fish that you'd be catching. So go out there now. Like I say, I've got about 15-20 bits of corn in this pot. Get right to the end of my section, elbow on the back end of my section, line up with my marker, which is basically a little twig, and also, like I said before, I don't want to be any further away than 6 inches off that bank. So what I always like to do is put the pot on the water first, just to make sure that I'm in the right spot. Rather than trying to tip it and get it wrong, put the pot on the water and just slowly at this point, just turn your pot over and then hold it. And what will happen is, because it's a fast release pot, your bait will just then melt out, rather than your bait tipping out as you turn your pot, because then what you can do is you can spread it up and down the shell. And that's why I always like to give it a little press. It just holds it in there that little bit better. But what happens is the slits on this pot just allows it to release. It just allows like the air to get in and push it out. So again, another pot of that. I feel like this 400 ml is a good starting point for carp. Another one of them, end of my section, pot on the water, slowly turn it over, hold it in position, and the pot will do the work for you. And then a gentle lift up, little bang, just to get any bait out of the bottom. And that is now my margin fed, ready for action. So I won't go straight in on that because I don't feel like, one, the fish probably won't have arrived straight away, and also I need to give them time to gain confidence. If I went straight on it and let's say I caught a carp, brilliant, I've caught a carp, but I've not let the fish gain confidence. If I can get 4 or 5 carp feeding there at once, they're going to be so much easier to catch. So generally, let's imagine we're halfway through the match and it's time to now feed this peg. There's 2.5 hours to go. I would either go and have a look in half an hour's time, sort of, so I've got 2 hours left of the match, or I might then feed another 200 mil with 2 hours to go and save that for the last hour. But what I'm doing then is save it for the last hour and a half, and then what I'm doing is I'm building the confidence of the fish. We're not going to be able to see the fish there unless they colour the bottom up. We're not going to see tails and stuff like you would when you're fishing in really shallow water. So it's a little bit unknown. We won't know the fish are there until we go down and try it. But I definitely won't go and feed margin and go straight on it, because the worst thing you can do is try and catch that first 1 or 2 fish that comes in your peg. They don't then settle because there's no competition, and your margin fish just tails off very quickly. So that's the peg fed. Give it 20-30 minutes. Might give it one more pot, try and fish it exactly the same as I would in a match scenario, and then I'll run you through what I do once we start fishing. I've been priming this line up. I'm expecting fish to be there and waiting. When you're margin fishing, you primed it up, there should be fish waiting for you. So we should get one first chuck. I'm going to turn my pot over, place it in position of where I want to feed, gently lift it off the surface, and then drag that float into position, using them back shots to keep the rig on that shelf, on that top little shelf. Now, if I go in here and I don't have a bite 5-10 minutes, the peg's not ready and they're not there, they're not confident. When you're margin fishing, the fish are coming there to feed. So, you know, you don't want to be sat there patiently waiting. So that's a good sign straight away. A little indication on the float. That's brilliant. You want to make sure that your peg is primed up, ready, so that you can catch for a solid period. So there we go. Fish straight away. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. It might look, oh well, you know, that's easy. You just put your bait in, but you've done all the hard work because you've primed it up ready. I don't think it's a big fish, but it's a carp, and it was instant as well. So that tells me that the fish are happy. They've been sat there feeding. It's not a bad fish. I know there is a lot of like 3-4 pounders on this peg. That's basically what this is, one of them little mirrors, like 3-4 pound in size. There we go. So now what you've got to work out is, like, once you've primed that peg and you've worked out how many fish you're fishing for, you know, if I'm looking to catch 60 pounder, then I'm probably going to need about 15 or 16 of them. They're probably like £4 average, maybe just under £4. If that's what my target would be margin fishing, you know, you have to work out how long is it going to take to catch 16 of them. Now what can happen is, or what happens a lot, is I go in there and I get 4 or 5 really quickly, and then all of a sudden the peg starts to fade. When you first go in down the edge, that should be your best spell. The first time you go on it is when the fish are going to be the most confident, and I can just kinder pot it and keep fishing it. When it starts to go a little bit slower, that's when I have to start drawing them back into the peg. That's when I might have to start using a bigger pot. But at the minute, we've got that XL fast release pot on. That's probably just enough ground bait, because there's no other food content in it. Just enough ground bait to probably get us a bite. So again, bait in position, draw that float up the slope. Once it's on the slope, use that back shot to keep it in position. Straight away I had a liner, so there's already fish sat in my peg waiting. So there's a funny indication there. Don't want to feed just yet. Sorry, I don't want to strike just yet. The fish basically are causing me liners there. Now my rig's sat nice, so hopefully next bite will be a nice bite. So I can see my float moving about. There's fish on that slope. Sometimes it's good to catch a couple and then your peg will naturally settle down. It'll actually get easier. When you first go in, there's probably 4 or 5 carp there at the minute. Little liner again. I know it's a liner because it's slow. I'm looking for a faster indication. That one went down the slope. And if you prime your peg right, like, it can almost be as quick as summer fishing. Like, the fishing can be really good, but this will slow at some point, and then it's a case of how much do I need to feed, how often do I need to feed, have the fish gone, do I need to bring them back into the peg? So this one's fighting a little bit harder. I don't know if it's a big fish, it just might be a little bit angrier. That black elastic's just working nice. So keeping a bit of pressure on the fish, but just waiting for him to turn its head. He was just running a bit then. Feels a little bit bigger, but it's hard to tell, to be honest. Now when you're playing the fish, try and keep your pole low, just like you would a rod, and sort of like pump it back. Keeping the pressure on the fish, you know, not pulling hard, but keeping that constant pressure. If you let the fish start to run and get a run up on you, that's when you normally get broke. If you can keep a slight constant pressure on the fish, keeping that pole tip low, and then when he starts to come under your feet like this, until I feel like he's ready, and then last minute I sort of lift up. So I lift up there now, there we go. That was a good example of when you're playing carp, it's probably a 5-6 pound fish. When you're playing carp like that, you just play them like you would on a rod. Low pressure, but steady pressure. The reason you get done a lot of the time when you're carp fishing, he's nailed that, is because you let them get a run up on you. So that one's a little bit bigger. All of a sudden, you don't need to catch 15 of them to get to 60 pound. It's probably like 6 pound in size. Lovely fully scaled mirror. Let's pop him back. But now we've got the fish there, we've got them feeding, we just need to keep them competing. So at the moment, I'm thinking to myself, what do I need to feed? Well, that's working, that's enough ground bait to get a bite. If I feel like the fish are sitting on my bait, there's probably too much bait there and they're going mad on it. So what I might do is take that XL off and go back down to just a large size, because I don't need to feed if they're already there. You don't need to attract them, you just need to put enough ground bait in to get a bite. So that large, you imagine the large pot, that bit of ground bait there is just enough to get you one bite. A little bit of cloud going through the water attracts the fish, you've got a nice visible heavy hook bait. All of a sudden the fish comes in, he sees that cloud, straight to your hook bait, nice piece of corn, you get your bite. If all of a sudden the fish disappear and I'm kindering and it's like, well, they're gone now, then I've got to make a decision, you know, do I go back up to the XL or is that not enough bait? If it's not enough bait, that's when I bring the 200 pot in again. But if I keep feeding this on top of the fish now all the time, one, I might overfill them, but two, what's probably going to happen is I'm going to start foul hooking more fish. So it's about having the right amount of bait in your peg at any one time where the fish are happy. If there's not enough bait, they'll disappear. If there's too much bait, there's too much choice, you start foul hooking fish or they lose interest because there's too big of a pile of bait. Once you've got them there now, I can imagine they'll just be underneath that water, just feeding on that little bit of ground bait. There's nothing to fill them up because there's no particles in my ground bait. So all they're doing is rummaging around the peg, looking for an odd loose offering. I've got a nice big visual piece of yellow corn on there over a green ground bait that stands out like a sore thumb. All of a sudden they come in and they absolutely nail it. So for now, I feel like I'm just going to stay with the paste pot. I say paste pot, that's what we used to use. It's the same actual volume as a paste pot, the XL pot. Stay with the XL pot because I feel like that's a nice amount of bait. Single corn on the hook, but a big kernel. So I'm looking for the biggest piece of corn. And all I'm doing, when I hook it, I'm going through the top of the skin, so the tougher bit, just so it stays on a little bit better, and just coming out of the side. And that's how I like to hook my corn. So you've got two bits of skin. It's not going to strike straight off if I miss a bite. And then I've got that ground bait, which is slightly dampened, the green ground bait, the green bagger mix. Gently press that into the pot. When I get there, I put it on the water. Your ground bait empties out in that little sandcastle. And I feel like that, it's not too much bait. With ground bait, you can feed a little bit more than you can with particles because the actual bits of ground bait are not filling. The fish are sort of like sieving through them. They're eating it, but if you're feeding like micro pellets or something like that, it can fill them up very quickly. Whereas with this, you can feed a decent amount of bait, but it's not actually that filling to the fish. So keep repeating what I do until something changes, and then I might have to pick that big pot up. But for now, the fish are there, they're feeding confidently, there's no need to change. Right, we've had an amazing run there, just kinder potting that XL pot, but I just feel like it's slowing slightly the peg. Now, I could probably go in and get another one, but I feel like it might take me another 4 or 5 minutes, which is still amazing fishing, but I feel like if I put a bit more bait in, I might gather a couple more fish back, and then I'll get another strong run again. So, 2 key things that you've got to look out for that your margin fishing's slowing. One, your bite time. You know, when I first went in, solid for 4 or 5 fish. Every time I'm going in, within 2 or 3 minutes, I'm hooking a fish. It's brilliant. Then all of a sudden it takes 4 minutes, then the next one takes 4 minutes, the next one's 5 minutes, the last one's 6 minutes. It's like I can just feel my peg slightly fading. The other key thing is stamp of fish. The first, I want to say 6 fish was all sort of like 4 to 6 pound, and then 2 of my last 3 fish have been 3 pound. So the stamp is getting slightly smaller as well. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go in, just give them like 200 ml of ground bait again, just to try and get a bit more bait. It's what I said before, it's about having the right bait, the right amount of bait in your peg, so that you can not only hold the fish, but if there's not enough there, they'll just lose interest. So I'm putting this in to basically keep that little dinner plate, that little area of my peg, topped up and fed so that the fish stay there for longer. So same as what I've said before, pot on the water, turn your pot round, hold it nice and steady, your ground bait will come out. And it's all about working out how much bait to feed to catch a fish. So I don't need to go in and feed this again now. I'm not going to put anything in my smaller pot. I'm just going to take a nice big kernel of corn again and just go straight in. I'm going to keep my pot on because next chuck, sort that elastic out, next chuck, if I get one now, great, there's going to be a little bit of excess bait in the peg. I'll be able to just go back in and kinder, and hopefully we'll get another decent run of fish then. So that's all you've really got to work out. Obviously, in a match situation, time would be running out now. You know, bite straight away. So they've definitely come straight back to that slightly bigger amount of bait. What I don't want to do, I don't like to constantly keep big potting it, because then you can have too much bait in your peg, and like there, it's a little bit too quick for my liking. It's nice to have fish in your peg, but sometimes you want to sit there for like a minute before the fish comes in, finds it, and then it goes under. If you're getting bites really quick within like 10-20 seconds, sometimes what happens is the fish are already in your peg waiting for the bait. So like putting more bait on top of it can make the situation worse. So this feels a lot nicer. The rig's in position, it's settled. Hopefully a fish will come in, find that hook bait. There we go, that's perfect. So that big pot has just dragged them back a little bit quicker. We're not waiting 5 or 6 minutes for that bite again now. But there are 2 key things you've got to look out for. Your bite time slowing down, your stamp of your fish going a little bit smaller. Sometimes the fish naturally just go smaller the more you've sort of, you know, caught out your peg. You're not going to catch a 5-6 pounder every single chuck. You know, some venues, 5-6 pound might be a small one, and you might catch 10 pounders to start with. But basically, that's a thing I see a lot in fishing, is your stamp generally just gets smaller as the peg starts to run out, if you like. And like I say, if we're looking for an hour and a half's worth of fishing, you know, we've probably had an hour's worth now. If we can get another half an hour to an hour's worth out of this, which I think you would today, because obviously the fishing's really good, then that'd be amazing for margin fishing at this time of the year. Not a massive one, but it's hard fighting. It's probably 3.5 pound. Nice little mirror. Just showing me how to finish. All I do now is literally just go in, back with a kinder pot. Absolute beautiful fish here at the Glebe. We're going to finish on that one, but I hope you picked a few tips up. Get out there, margin fishing in the spring. The carp are now starting to wake up. All I do there now is literally go back to my pot, carry on doing what I'm doing. If the peg fades again, I'm going to put a bit more bait in. You know, put that big pot back on. But you don't want to be a big pot in every chuck because you can make the situation work. Too many fish coming in your peg sometimes, too much bait there. It takes longer for them to find your hook bait. If you're getting loads and loads of signs on this pot and it's too much, just feed a little bit less. Just go to the next pot size down and that might just solve the problem for you. But the key thing with margin fishing is doing it at the right time of the day, priming that line up, and then once you're on it, the actual mechanics of it, you know, your rig, your pot, your feeding, it's really, really simple. It's all about timing and picking the right spots to fish and doing it at the right time. So I hope you enjoyed it and picked a few tips up. Thanks for watching.